in the street where you live, and 1 house in 3 is empty because all the people who died of a terrible disease. That was the kind of catastrophe that the Black Death was. So it was a great drama. And it was more than just a drama because it changed the way people thought. It undermined people's faith in traditional medicine, which was entirely based on ancient writers, Galen and Hippocrates. Medieval medicine was terrible. At Oxford University, the main method of teaching medicine to priests who wanted to be doctors was to read passages from these old books and have a debate about it. The students never saw patients. That was the kind of medicine that people were used to in the Middle Ages, and it was completely unable to help people in the Black Death. So people's faith in traditional medicine was undermined, and this was a good thing because it made room for progress towards a more scientific kind of medicine. After the Black Death, medical practitioners began to observe the patients and make notes. Make notes like the patient's temperature fell after 24 hours, or the patient had a fever for 3 days, and keep records. And this is the beginning of science. So scientific medicine, modern medicine, began immediately after the Black Death in the reaction to the helplessness of traditional medicine as practiced by the priests. I'm often asked about my research for my books, and I use experts for all of my books. I hire experts to read the first draft and look for errors. So with World Without End, I had 3 historians, an expert on the Black Death, an expert on the Battle of Crecy, and a general expert on the Middle Ages. And I asked them to read my first draft and tell me about any mistakes. And I pay them quite well because I want them to take it, and I want them to see it as a very serious piece of work. I don't want them to take it lightly. I want them to read very carefully and send me very detailed notes, because I don't want any errors to remain in the published book. So, but I do sometimes have arguments with them, because by the time I get to that stage, I know quite a lot about the subject, and so I knew a lot about medieval medicine by the time I finished the first draft of World Without End. And I had an argument with Sam Cohen, my expert on the Black Death, because he said I had overstated the uselessness of medieval medicine. And he gave me a book that I should read, and I analysed all the illnesses mentioned in this book. And where possible, I discovered what the modern diagnosis would be, and the medieval treatment and the modern treatment. And I made a table. And I gave this to my daughter, who was a doctor, and said, tell me which of these medieval remedies would have worked. And of all the remedies in the book, only one would have worked, and that was washing wounds with wine. Everything else they did would either have made no difference at all, or it would have killed the patient. So medieval medicine was truly incompetent. And I went back to Sam Cohen and I said, okay, tell me one case, one illness, where the medieval doctor would have made a correct diagnosis and treated the patient with something that would have made the patient better. And Sam never answered that question. So I figured medieval medicine really was as bad as I painted it. And so, not surprisingly, the Black Death discredited medical practice at the time, and that had another consequence, because all doctors were priests. At the beginning of World Without End, the young girl, Caris, who's going to be one of the heroes of the story, when she's 8 years old, she says, when I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor. And everybody laughs, because they know that girls can't be doctors. And they say to you, you can't be a doctor, you're a girl. Only boys can be doctors. And Caris, even at the age of 8, Caris is a typical Ken Follett woman, and she refuses to accept this restriction on her activity. She says, I'm going to be a doctor anyway, and that defines her life. But because all the doctors were priests, the Black Death undermined people's faith in the church. And after the Black Death, a new attitude to religion began to appear. People began to talk about Christians being able to speak to God directly. Before the Black Death in the early Middle Ages, you couldn't talk to God. You couldn't just sit at home or kneel at your bed and pray. You had to go to church. Only the priests could talk to God. After the Black Death, the idea became current that anybody could talk to God anywhere, at any time. And that very modern idea came about as a result of the people's loss of faith, not in God, of course, but in the church. So as well as being a terrific drama, the Black Death was also the beginning of an intellectual change in European thought. And that drew me to it as well. That finally made it seem to me that the Black Death was a great theme for a novel, a theme comparable to the building of a cathedral in the Pillars of the Earth. These conflicts, some people, this book has been criticised by some members of the church. But what I'd like to point out is that these conflicts all take place within the church. This is not, the World Without End is not about conflicts between the church and the rest of society. It's about conflicts within the church between conservatives and progressives, but they are all priests and monks and nuns. It's an internal argument that the church had in the Middle Ages. So the Black Death is a turning point between the Middle Ages and the modern era. And you can see the intellectual developments that interested me so much as the beginning of the movement that eventually led to the Enlightenment.